We're joined today by State Representative Ryan Werner. You're sponsoring legislation that would prevent cities from designating themselves as sanctuary cities. Two-part question. First of all, for those unfamiliar, what is a sanctuary city and why would you want to ban this designation?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. So basically a sanctuary city or a sanctuary municipality, because it could be a county, doesn't necessarily have to be a city. It would be a municipality in our Commonwealth that basically would tell its police not to cooperate or report to ICE an illegal immigrant or an undocumented immigrant. The reasoning behind that is that we have a legal immigration system here. There is a process and processes to come to our country legally. It is a streamlined process. Look, within the month of December alone, we had over 300,000 people immigrate to this country illegally rather, I'm sorry. Over the last year or so, we've had over 3 million people enter this country illegally. That's more than the population of like 30 some states. It is a very, very high number. So it's an issue. You have an illegal problem, right? So, a lot of people say, well, immigration is good for our country. Our country was founded on I And by no means, this isn't an anti-immigration bill. It doesn't stop legal immigration. Our country was founded on immigrants. It's not a humanitarian issue, because I stress the point that we still have legal immigration processes in this nation.
Are there Pennsylvania cities or municipalities that currently designate themselves as sanctuary cities or municipalities?
Yes, there's roughly, I think there's 13 counties right now, and then maybe 6 or 7 different cities that have that designation.
Is there a correlation between that sanctuary designation and the level of crime in those regions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Illegal immigrants have shown to have higher numbers of violent crime and crime in general, as opposed to those that immigrate here legally.
Your bill also has a provision that law enforcement officers who are arresting someone they suspect of being in the U.S. illegally to report those individuals to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Can you tell me a little bit about that provision?
Yeah, so in that provision, it's kind of self-explanatory, right? If a police officer, an officer has any suspicion that somebody is here illegally, according to the bill, they will have a duty to then report that person to ICE.
Does a similar provision exist in other states?
Yes.
What specific law enforcement entities would be covered by the bill?
You're basically looking at all police, sheriffs, those that work with the DA, any police enforcement entity within the Commonwealth.
How is the law enforcement community reacting to your proposal?
I've had no negative feedback that I'm aware of from the law enforcement community. Again, we have to look at it this way. We have laws on the books right now for immigration. By declaring yourself a sanctuary city, a sanctuary county, or sanctuary municipality, you are openly telling people it is okay to break the law. Not just illegal immigrants, you're telling society in general, we don't agree with these laws, so go break them. We don't agree. So could I then advocate for people to not pay federal income tax if they don't like it? There's a lot of people that might not think that's a fair or just law, but it wouldn't be reasonable for me to say, hey, Fayette County is a federal income tax sanctuary county. You no longer have to pay federal income taxes here. That really wouldn't fly. It's also an insult to the people that do go through this process legally. It's the United States of America has a lot of people that would like to come here, right? I mean, out of the world's population, we have tons of people that come here. I believe that we have every right to know who those people are that are coming here, to make sure that they're not here for bad purposes. I mean, we have to just look at the people that support illegal immigration: MS-13, human traffickers, drug smugglers, terrorists, cartels. These are the people that support illegal immigration. And that's not to say that there aren't people that come here illegally looking for a better way of life. There definitely are. However, you're opening up the door to those types of entities to come into our country. It goes against what our country, it goes against what we stand for. Because again, you're not blocking immigration. You're blocking illegal immigration. It is for us to get an understanding of the people that come here. And, to be a legal immigrant, part of that is understanding the culture and background of the United States of America, the founding principles of the United States of America, and also having a proficiency in English.
Your bill would also give legal standing to injured persons against a municipality or a city under certain circumstances. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to be a municipality that openly defies federal law, that says we will harbor illegal immigrants, this bill would then allow an individual that would be harmed by an illegal immigrant to sue the municipality, which I only think is fair, especially if that crime could have been averted. And I think that, we look at the recent murder of Laken Riley, and that would be a perfect example. Had authorities done what they were supposed to do by law, she would probably still be alive today.
Do you see your bill as serving a function in our national security?
Absolutely. This bill serves a function for national security and, as I just the example I used, and personal safety. But again, I mentioned, if you're not going to put checks and balances on who enters our country, if you're going to support a wide open border, what's stopping terrorist organizations from coming into this? What's there's nothing stopping them. Again, this isn't a bill to say keep out. It's a bill to say you're welcome, but we just want to do a little bit of a background check before we let you into our house.
Does similar legislation exist in other states?
I am aware of a couple other bills. I don't know the bill numbers or the states off the top of my head, but yes, the legislation does exist in other states that ban sanctuary cities.
How are your colleagues in the legislature responding?
Actually, there is bipartisan support around this. I think, given the recent episodes in Texas, again, Laken Riley, there's been a couple other instances, and I think there was a recent murder from another illegal immigrant. There has been bipartisan support behind the legislation, and again, I think a bigger support in general right now, just given the state of illegal immigration in our country.
What are the biggest concerns you've heard in terms of opposition to the bill?
Again, I think the biggest opposition to the bill is that it's portrayed that you're against immigration in general because you are opposed to illegal immigration. And again, I disagree with that. I don't think it's a humanitarian issue. We have legal processes, and maybe someone says, well, those processes aren't as streamlined or as quick as they need to be. Okay, well, then you need to work inside the system to change those. If you think there's a problem with that's not how our country works. You don't say, hey, I don't think that process works quick enough, so just go disobey the law. Just go disobey it, put people at risk, allow the possibility of terrorists, gangs, drug smugglers, human traffickers to come in our country because we think that process is broken. Again, I think that there needs to be a clear line drawn between legal and illegal immigration, because that seems to be one of the biggest points of opposition I always hear is, oh, our country was founded on immigration. Immigrants are good for our country. And to that, I don't disagree with. Again, I stress the point. This is not a anti-immigration bill. It's an anti-illegal immigration bill.
Allegheny County Executive Sarah Innamorato said the country should welcome immigrants for, quote, population stabilization and economic growth, end quote, reasons. Your comments on that?
Yeah, you know what? Absolutely. And within the last decade, we've allowed more legal immigrants, again, I stress legal immigrants, into the United States of America than almost any time in the history of this country. So I don't disagree with her statement. Again, it goes back to what I just said. People that are against the legislation act like you're against immigration in general, which simply is not the case, because it's one of the only talking points that they have against it, is that somehow you're against immigration. So while I have this time here, I'll stress it that I don't necessarily disagree with that statement at all, because under my bill, that still is able to happen. We're still able to have immigrants to our country. The city of Pittsburgh will still be able to welcome immigrants.
Where's your bill in the legislative process?
Right now, it is in the Judiciary Committee.
I'd like to move on and talk about another piece of legislation that you're sponsoring. This bill would have juries consider the death penalty for convicted child rapists. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we've worked a lot on child rapist, child sexual abuse over the last few sessions here. We have voted on a lot of bills that dealt with civil penalties and opening up civil penalties for sexual predators and child rapists. And, there's arguments for or against, opening up the civil side of it. And, I do know that some of those bills that were highly supported from lawyers, you'd have a lot more lawsuits. But I thought, we've never heard anything about the criminal side of it. And frankly, I think the sexual abuse of a child is one of the most heinous crimes in our country that you can commit. And I think it deserves a punishment fitting of that crime.
Was there a specific case or incident that prompted you to sponsor this legislation?
So what prompted me to sponsor it was the passage of similar legislation in Florida. When Governor DeSantis signed their bill into law, it allowed me to spearhead this in Pennsylvania.
What kind of reaction are you receiving on this?
Again, this has been an overwhelmingly bipartisan support for this legislation. I'm actually surprised at some of the people back home in the community that we have support for it. Again, there are people that are against it because they're against the death penalty in general, and they have a right to believe it. But it is something that a punishment that exists in our society. Again, I reiterate, I think it's one of the worst crimes that you can commit in this country.
Do you anticipate holding hearings on this bill?
Yeah, I would hope that we could hold hearings on the bill. Again, this is one of the greatest things about our country is that each state has the ability to set laws, right? And this is why I've always been in favor of states being able to do more and the federal government maybe doing less, because maybe California, for example, I don't ever see a piece of legislation like this flying in California, which is fine. But to see Florida be able to introduce and pass it, again, other states, we can learn from other states too, to see how the legislation works, to see does it curb this behavior. So, but to that note, yes, I would absolutely love to see public hearings and greater discussion on the legislation. I can hop back real quickly to the sanctuary city bill and just say that even the discussion of legislation can often promote change. So, for example, the sanctuary city bill, when it was aired on the network news in Pittsburgh, Westmoreland County then changed its sanctuary city status just from people being able to see that news report. The county commissioners there, who I give credit to, then changed their status. So similar to this legislation, the death penalty legislation, even the hearings and discussions on it can start to promote change. Even if it isn't necessarily exactly the language in my bill, I would hope that it would be able to promote change.
Before we run out of time, I'd like to talk a little bit about the state budget as well. Viewers should know that you serve on 3 committees that are very relevant to budget negotiations: the Appropriations Committee, the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, as well as the Transportation Committee. Governor Shapiro made his budget address in February, so lawmakers are just really finished up the appropriations hearings recently, and you're starting to consider the pieces of the budget. What stood out to you most this year?
Well, after the appropriation hearings, I'd say what stood out to me most is that we don't have a lot of details. There needs to be more details on a lot of different ideas that the governor had promoted. The other thing that stood out to me was the amount of money that the governor had proposed to spend. Look, I'm very happy that we were able to put away a record amount of money into our rainy day fund. My fear with that now is that it's now looked at as a fund to just spend when it's not quite a rainy day yet. And, lessons learned, I guess, rather than hold a large rainy day fund, I think in the future, maybe we just need to consider tax cuts, right? Give it back to the people so that it can't be spent. I do think that it is financially sound to have money in our rainy day fund to prevent future tax increases. So to that point, the biggest part of the governor's budget proposal that I stand opposed to is that we are spending down our reserves and our rainy day fund.
Could you talk a little bit to the value of those appropriations hearings, and specifically, do they have any influence on what actually happens in the budget end product?
Yes, I believe that they do have an impact on what you see, again, because you're able to understand some things better. You're also able to make points to the secretaries that then they're able to give feedback to the governor that something maybe they missed, maybe something important local to you. But there are an array of different questions that are asked that the answers are enlightening to, that do help out. Do they help craft the whole budget? No, but does it help? Yes.
2 potential revenue sources that have been discussed are legalizing recreational marijuana and then also taxing skill games. Do you support either of those?
I do support taxing skill games. I mean, look, we have record profits in our casinos, record profits in the lottery. I don't believe that legalizing skill games will have any impact on the revenues for either of those entities. As far as marijuana, and this is a topic that I had brought up in appropriation hearings, there are a lot of problems with it because even if you legalize it in Pennsylvania, it's still illegal federally, right? So it's not. You can still be punished by federal law enforcement for marijuana possession. It doesn't make the crime actually go away altogether. One of the other issues that I had with it is so if someone's consuming alcohol and gets into a car, the state police have a mechanism to test the person's ability to drive based on how much alcohol they can consume, right? And if you consume too much, then you get a DUI. There's a punishment for it. The state police said during my questioning that there is not a mechanism to do that for marijuana. That's a grave concern for me. So if someone has a lot of THC in their system for marijuana, doesn't have the ability to drive a car, there's no check on it. There's no way for our state police to say, okay, this person's had too much marijuana, they're not able to drive. So given those instances, I wouldn't support that proposal. And as I mentioned before, the governor doesn't really have a whole lot of details on his proposal as far as how that's going to work.
Last year during budget negotiations, there was disagreement over the PASS scholarship program, something that many can compare to school vouchers. The governor had originally voiced his support, and then when House Democrats were not in favor of it, he vetoed the proposal. What does the governor need to do this year to regain the trust of your caucus before moving forward with the budget?
I don't know if you really do regain trust after that. That was pretty big. I mean, it wasn't just a pledge to the legislature, right? Like, it was a campaign pledge. It was something he ran on. He was on Fox News promoting that it's something that he would support. We were able, able to have, get it through the Senate. I think the governor supported it. I believe it was just the House Democrats that were the holdup on the issue. So I don't know if you do regain trust from something like that. It definitely makes budget negotiations a lot harder, right? So it's like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. So I do see that as a hindrance to budget negotiation, because it wasn't just like a small detail. I mean, it was a pretty big promise that was broken.
What would you ultimately like to see come out of this year's state budget?
I would like to see reasonable spending. I mean, one other proposal I'd be in favor of for this year's budget is an overhaul of the way that we fund our schools, right? Like, so the courts have ruled our funding mechanism is unconstitutional, and personally, I think it would be a great way and a great time to get rid of a property tax system that most people aren't fond of. I think if you eliminate property taxes, you are now able to equally fund schools across this Commonwealth. It's like the mechanism that causes, in my opinion, the imbalance in education funding. So I think it would be a perfect time. I mean, I know it'd be a home run. I know that it's a long shot, but if we're overhauling the education system and we have to fund these schools equally, I don't think just throwing more money at the problem is going to fix it. I think we need to overhaul the system. And again, I would love it for a time to use this time to eliminate property taxes and look at funding our children in our schools equally and not base their education on a zip code.
Representative Ryan Warner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.